room. It's Speedy Sarko against Mr. Ordinary. What might sound like the title of a Looney Tunes cartoon is, as of this past Sunday evening, the possible draw for next May's second round of France's presidential election. This is François Hollande, former chair of the largest opposition party, the Socialists. The unassuming manner that once sidelined him from the party leadership, bearing its fruit and now paying dividends as he beat the current party leader, Martine Aubry, by a resounding 56 to 44% in France's first ever open primary for president. Coming up, we'll try to connect the dots. You'll see they're quite interesting between Hollande, Aubry, and the socialist standard bearer last time around, the one that lost to Nicolas Sarkozy, Ségolène Royal. We'll look at what the French think of American-style primaries. Once again, this was a first, and wonder in the France 24 debate if François Hollande can beat Nicolas Sarkozy. With us from the French Socialist Party, Thomas Meloniot. Thank you for joining us.
Bonjour.
It wasn't too long a night. You had your early returns, and
Actually, we had the result pretty early in the night due to the technological system we had set in place, and so at something like 7:30 p.m. we had the results already.
okay.
Which avoided a long night of contest, and which was very fortunate.
All right, so now you can party unity. Now we'll get back to that issue of sealing party unity. Also with us, the editor-in-chief of one of France's leading newsweekly magazines, Denis de Montpion. Thank you for being with us. Let's also welcome from Republicans Abroad, Mark Porter, who will explain to us a little bit later on the intricacies and arcaneness of primaries in another country that's on the other side of the Atlantic. We'll get to that in a moment. And we hope to get through to Dennis McShane in a moment, the Labour Member of Parliament, caught, it seems, in London traffic for now, but we'll get to him shortly. The France 24 debate, which you can always follow on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is at FrancoisF24. Now, for those that know the nitty-gritty of French politics, he's a mainstay, bred in the right elite graduate schools, an advisor to President Mitterrand back in 1981, who rose through the ranks to become party leader. But abroad, he's still unknown. Denis de Montpion, who is François Hollande?
Yeah, he's even unknown of most French people, as a matter of fact, because he never had a job, very officially. He was never minister, and
He's party leader, though.
Yeah, well, for 11 years, that's true. But he was born in Rouen, the city of Joan of Arc, where she died and
burned at the stake, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he studied there, and he had a very classical
rise through the ranks.
Yeah, indeed, because as you said, he went to the highest school, that makes the French elite, and he was very cautious. He was never a communist, never a Trotskyist, like many of his kind. His father was a doctor who did very well, and who was rather far-wing in politics, because he twice ran, for the extreme right in France at elections. The last one in '65, when de Gaulle was running for the presidential election, and if he turned to the left, it was more, according to what his mother was. She was very impressed by François Mitterrand right back to 1965, when he managed to actually compel de Gaulle to a second round.
He pushed him to a runoff.
Exactly, in the presidential election.
So François Hollande seen more as somebody who's a party man, a social democrat, moderate, as you say.
Moderate, very much.
François Hollande, who in fact told the party leadership on Sunday evening that his nomination's the culmination of a long process.
Cette victoire me confère la force.
This victory gives me the power and legitimacy to prepare for the presidential election. The result of the primaries is only the first step, the first stage in a process that I started many years ago. And all this was made possible thanks to the relation of trust that I built with the socialists and the left wing.
Avec les socialistes et avec la gauche.
All right, a painstaking process, a process started many years ago, as you heard, but somehow fate lent a helping hand. Until a hotel mate entered room 2806 at the Times Square Sofitel back in May, the now former boss of the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, was the overwhelming favorite to take the Socialist Party nod. It's only after that date that Hollande started bagging key endorsements. Thomas Meloniot, without that scandal that engulfed the frontrunner, he wouldn't be there today, would he, François Hollande?
Well, that you don't know. It was because he was actually starting to be ready to challenge Dominique Strauss-Kahn. He was actually the only serious candidate at the time to be ready to challenge Dominique Strauss-Kahn. So you'll never know, it's political fiction. But I think actually he was rising in the polls at the time, and people were expecting not necessarily a tough fight, but at least a fight between him and Dominique Strauss-Kahn. And probably one reason why François Hollande eventually defeated Martine Aubry was that he had shown that he was ready to fight for the job.
So it's interesting because on the one hand, we hear that the outgoing president's a polarizing figure, that there's talk about a hard left, and the man that Denise just painted is, in practice, someone who's quite moderate. So why is it that the opposition is picking a moderate?
That's because it's going to make a change with the current president, who's very divisive. So I think François Hollande actually is popular because he's consensual.
Well, not only that, I think that if they choose Hollande, it's because I think the voters believe that he's got more chance to win votes on the center and on the center right than Martine Aubry, who was, the woman, the minister who voted in France.
For the 35-hour work week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's to her a great, inconvenience. And therefore, I think everyone realized, they're fed up with Sarkozy in a way. And the only chance, anyway, to have a good chance to get rid of him would be to obviously back up Hollande.
All right, now we can go to London and to Dennis McShane, Member of Parliament for the Labour Party. Dennis, when you first met François Hollande, did you at the time think this guy one day will be the nominee for president?
He was always there in the top of the next generation, as it were. And the right age, he's very sharp intellectually. I mean, the classic French training, ENA, and above all, he was a party man. I think some of the guys and women who were ministers in the Lionel Jospin government, 1997 to 2002, got, the French word is usé, they got used up by being ministers, and Hollande was there doing the party work, explaining, networking internationally, extremely nice, easy to get to know kind of guy. And you just thought, this man perhaps is the sleeper who one day will come through.
Mark Porter, let me ask you to rebound on that because it's interesting. Last time around in 2007, the candidate won despite the leadership of her own party. When you observe French politics, you see how important it is, the machine, the party machine. Is it the same where you come from?
Well, it depends how you look at the United States. The United States has had a primary system for about 100 years because we wanted to get away from the sort of backroom cigar smoking kind of deals that we were.
That's one of the reasons why you instituted the primaries.
That was the major reason. Yes, there was too much corruption in the process, and we wanted to make it more transparent. So we came out with sort of different fashions. What's happened, though, is the evolution of the primary system into the caucuses and the primaries, and each state sort of runs its own system, is sort of a confusing, chaotic sort of thing that sometimes has the same effect that we tried to get rid of. But what's so shocking in France is, okay, you've instituted the primary system, but in fact, it looks like the same people that are running. So what I'm seeing is perhaps the beginnings of a real primary system where new people can be encouraged, younger people, new people outside the system can be encouraged to come up and to start to participate, especially when they see they can present their ideas directly to the people or the members of the party. One thing I didn't understand when you said it's an open party for the Socialist Party primaries, is it open in that everyone can vote? or open so that just socialist party members
Good question.
could vote.
The system, if I understand correctly, was that you could all you had to do was sign a letter of intent saying that you had the beliefs of the left, and drop
And the Republic.
of the Republic, and drop a €1 coin into the box to help with the organization. Some have quipped, by the way, that that's akin to a poll tax. Some foreigners.
Actually, you could give more than €1, so and many people actually did.
Have you counted the money?
Yes, we have. And the good news is that we have actually made some money with the primaries, with a very big number of small gifts, from 1 to 5 or 10.
Where does this money go?
It's actually, so in France you have to run the presidential campaign, you are allowed to spend a certain amount of money, and all the money that has been collected during the primaries will benefit the candidate. So the candidate will actually benefit from all the money collected through the primaries.
We'll talk more about the primary system in a moment, but let's just mention that it's the day after, and now comes the interesting bit, warns the conservative UMP party.
The real debate starts now. François Hollande can't remain the man who has never made a tough decision. I followed his campaign, and it's impossible to tell what he feels about any issue personally. He changes his positions all the time, but now he has to take responsibility. Our job is to get French voters interested in this campaign, and I can tell you that the man who won the vote within his party in October will not necessarily win the presidential election in May.
And President Sarkozy himself has been trying to stay above the fray and out of the argument so far. His next big public speaking engagement scheduled a week from today. But that hasn't stopped reporters from picking up on his private quips, like the one last week where Sarkozy compared Hollande to a sugar cube. It looks solid when you hold it, but add water and it dissolves. Denis de Montpion, are you relishing the prospect of Nicolas Sarkozy against François Hollande in a debate? What do you see that being like?
I think Sarkozy shouldn't, and he doesn't, underestimate Hollande at all, because right from the beginning of the primary, his candidate was Martine Aubry. He really wanted her to win this primary. Why? Because he knew it would be much more easier for the Conservative to criticize her and fight against her. As for Hollande, not only because he's never been a minister before, but because he's, he says, he dissolves in water, and, well, he is much more cautious and much more clever than you would expect. And that could be a real hindrance to Sarkozy to actually fight him back, because he will have to, next year, show what he's done in 5 years, and he will probably have a hard time, considering the crisis and the situation now.
And I don't think Sarkozy underestimates Hollande either, because there's one man who has already beaten Nicolas Sarkozy, and it's François Hollande. During the 1999 European elections, both were confronting each other as the head of the list of the conservative and progressive parties, and Sarkozy was actually heavily defeated at the time. So I don't think he can underestimate Hollande.
But it is, once again, Dennis McShane, it's 6 months from now, and we know that the thick of a presidential campaign, things can get a tad bit ugly. And Nicolas Sarkozy, known as a formidable campaigner, is it better to be a bit of a battler when you enter that home stretch before the election?
Well, tricky. I mean, if President Sarkozy was a rugby player, I think his manager would be terrified of the red card for being sent off for fouls on the pitch. I mean, he doesn't see a belt without wanting to give it a good kicking about 6 inches lower down. Now, I'm not sure whether these insults, these rather patronising tones, if I was the right, I would just go away and think. But they sounded a bit panicky from the little extracts you showed me. But it's an interesting campaign, because in the past, François Mitterrand, you knew he was candidate for months, if not years beforehand. France got used to him. They gave him a couple of outings and he lost, and then finally he won in 1981. Here's François Hollande arriving, quite well known to the professional political class, but to the people of France, he has to find a language to address them. If he talks simply to the socialists, to the left, to the readers of the Nouvel Observateur, my favourite magazine in Europe, if I dare say so, he won't go far. So it's an extraordinary strategic chess-like game. But I sense 3 million people turning out, not dedicated socialist people who'd never been involved in party politics before, saying, we want a different France. This is an extraordinary Obama-esque Tony Blair in 1995, 96 kind of momentum. If Hollande knows how to ride that, catalyze it, then I think Mr. Sarkozy is going to have a big fight. But believe me, it's going to be the political fight of the century so far.
Guardian correspondent Kim Wilshire picks up on a recent poll that found 48% of French people believe Hollande can fix the economy, compared with 28% for Sarkozy, and points to contrasting styles with an example. While Sarkozy is acutely conscious of his height, to the point of avoiding being photographed with taller people during visits, Hollande, just 3 centimeters above Sarkozy, laughs about his size, saying it makes him difficult to knock over because of his low center of gravity. Let me ask you, Mark Porter, what do Americans in general think of Nicolas Sarkozy's fighting style?
I think Americans love Sarkozy because he was the first president to actually tell us that we were welcome in Europe, right? So we have a very great respect for Sarkozy. He, in contrast to the previous president, had very nice things to say about the U.S. So whenever he comes to the U.S., we're quite pleased to have him there. And he says positive things about the relationship between France and the United States. And I think that most Americans don't know that he's not as tall as most other politicians. And I think that that's not really much of a problem.
Do you think that it's going to have to? It's going to again have to be a little bit more. You were mentioning earlier how you heard Dennis McShane say that François Hollande is going to have to speak to everyone and not just to the rank and file of the left. Does he know how to do that?
Oh, I would think so. Yes, because he's been traveling through France for quite a while. He's not only been first secretary of the Socialist Party, but since he worked for the primary, he spent a lot of time, seeing people and explaining. And it was amazing. I followed him several times in provincial town, and it was quite amazing how people were curious, to see what he had to say. And it's true. Maybe he promises less than Sarkozy did, but he's in a way more concrete. And, after, the bling-bling Sarkozy, French people, French voters might be very happy to have someone.
So boring is in. We'll get back to that point when the France 24 debate resumes.